Okay. I'm not directly seeing a way to call him directly from Teams, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that I'll figure that out as we continue. All right, cool. So thanks everybody for joining. We're about 5 minutes after the hour, so I'm gonna go. And Anmar are leading this today. And this is part of Greater Cincinnati Grotto's technical topics. So once a month, we've been trying to do a technical topic in caving. And so this particular month, we have Anmar and Don talking to us about the management aspects of rescue and how to be a helpful participant if you find out that a rescue is happening. And I think part of the reason why I, in particular, thought this would be a really interesting topic for our grotto is I know what we often look at with cave rescue is the technical aspects, the rigging, the hull systems, and those are kind of the cool, maybe fun even parts of it. But there's a whole lot more that goes on in a rescue than immediately meets the eye. And as somebody who has been on the wrong side of a rescue myself, sometimes it's hard to understand what's going on this on the surface, or what the bigger plan seems to have been, and just being able to process the fact that there's other things that are going on that maybe you didn't understand because you're working on this small aspect of it. So really, with the amount of experience that Don and Anmar have, they're great resources within Central Region, and I'll turn this over to them to talk about it for us.
All right. Well, thanks, Stephanie. Hopefully Don will be able to join us here at some point. Meanwhile, this will give him a sound check if he can actually get to that point. If not, I'm just going to do a quick little intro. My name is Anmar. Most of you know me, but some of you newer, especially the newer cavers, don't really have an idea of my background. I actually started caving 41 years ago now. I started when I was 13 years old. I went on a Buckner trip with my 8th grade science teacher, fell in love with it, and joined the local caving club and the local grotto, and pretty much started caving on average a couple of times a week ever since, and have pretty much kept that up. I actually thought I might be a little late for the meeting here tonight because last minute somebody called me up and said, "Hey, I want to take a coworker caving. Can you go with me?" And I actually got here about 15 minutes before the hour from a cave trip. So it's nice having caves in the backyard. But I got involved in my first cave rescue when I was 14. And I have been on about 200 cave rescues, got involved in doing medical stuff because I was hiking and backpacking a lot. I mean, now it would be considered child abandonment, but I was going hiking and backpacking by myself at age 14 and 15. And so what do you do if something goes wrong? So I learned wilderness survival. I learned how to take care of medical problems. I became an EMT at age 18. I took NCRC training at age 18. But by the time I took NCRC training, I'd already been on a couple dozen cave rescues. So this led to just kind of a long career in doing this. I've worked the streets as an EMT. I was the Central Region Coordinator of the National Cave Rescue Commission, and then I was the National Coordinator. I'm the lead author and editor of the U.S. Manual of Cave Rescue Techniques. I'm still an instructor with the NCRC, but I stepped down 3 years ago as the national coordinator because I'd done it for 12 years, which is a pretty long time. I'm currently the Central Region Coordinator for the newly formed NSS Vertical Training Commission. That's something that the NSS has formed to try and help get better coordinated vertical training out there to help prevent accidents, and also just to be a resource for grottos to have training programs that they can give in a much more organized fashion. So that's a little bit of my background. Professionally, I used to own Lost Creek Packs. I had that for 13 years, where I made a bunch of caving equipment. But for the last 12 or 13 years, I've been working with Indiana University in two separate capacities. I'm currently the program director for Indiana University's Emergency Medical Technician program, and I'm also an assistant director of risk management. which is my full-time job. So this has been my world. I have been immersed in this kind of stuff pretty much all of my life, and so I've seen it from both sides, both from the agency management side of it, and I've seen it from the caver side of it. Knocking on wood here, I have never seriously injured myself in a cave. I've had a few minor bumps and scrapes, and I've had a, as they say there, but for the grace of God go I. I've had a few of those close calls. But so far I've never had anything serious happen. And out of 8,000 or 9,000 hours underground, I think that's a pretty good track record. And I think that speaks well to the safety of caving in general, that cave rescues are so few and far between. This particular presentation, Stephanie actually asked me about this, I want to say like 6 months ago. And we had no idea that it would actually be pretty topical for those. A lot of familiar faces here that we had here from just a couple weeks ago. For most of you have probably heard that there was a pretty significant cave rescue in Fisher Ridge Cave. I see Paul, who's on the meeting here, fell down and went boom, and led to what is being euphemistically called Paul's Walkabout, a 3.5-day rescue out of Fisher Ridge. That was a pretty significant call, and a substantial number of people who are on this call here tonight were involved in that rescue and got called. So this is, I think, topical, but it's also something that I think is a good resource for anybody who might get called on a rescue. I also know, I see other names here who have been called on other rescues, including some big ones here. I know a few people here were called to either be on standby or actually went to Turkey for that rescue that happened back in September. So this is a topic near and dear to us. Again, to kind of preface before I get into the actual presentation that I've got here, and I'm kind of trying to kill a little bit of time here, hoping Don can get on because he was actually going to give that portion of the presentation. But to do a little preface to this, we want to present to you kind of what the agency side of a rescue looks like, why there's a management structure, and how it exists. And so that is the actual PowerPoint presentation portion of it, and then how you will fit into that. And then we're going to have a little bit more of an informal kind of, what do you do? Why, where do we as cavers fit into all of this? I see Don has unmuted himself. Don,
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Yay! All right, Don, I just introduced myself and kind of gave him a build up there. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. If I can remember that far back. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Don Paquette. I had my first cave, I think, in 1953. Y'all know when that was going on, right? I started caving in 1960 when we moved to Bloomington, Indiana, and I was on my first rescue in 1963. I was really interested in the NCRC when it was formed. Contacted Dan Smith at the 1976 convention. Told him I really liked his concept. Who was the Central Regional Coordinator? He said, "Where do you live?" And I said, "Bloomington, Indiana." And he smiled and said, "You are." And that's how I got involved in the NCRC. And I've been basically involved since. I've been an instructor. I was Central Regional Coordinator. I was National Coordinator for about 10 years. Back to Central Region for a while, and then I just kind of kicked back and said, let the new people take over, and worked as an instructor. And I've been an instructor basically for 42 years. So the thing that really, really impresses me about cave rescue is the fact that it still scares me because I'm still learning. And every time I think I really understand it, something jumps up that I've never seen before. So once somebody tells you they're an expert, run and run fast, because there aren't any of us. We don't exist. So
all right. Don, you want me to start the presentation? I kind of warmed the crowd up for you here.
Oh, okay. We're going to use this PowerPoint as kind of a keeper, so we kind of figure out where we're at, or
Yep. Let me get it
I don't
shared
see
here.
it. So,
I haven't shared it yet.
oh, okay.
Give me a second.
All right. There are no true axioms in cave rescue, or very few. So about everything we say has a certain degree of flexibility to it. But there are a few things that are true in all cases. So next slide. Now what you've been asked to help. So let's look at where we're at. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, the objective. This is a truism. The only objective in a cave rescue is to get the patient out of the cave to the entrance as quickly and as safely as possible, and hopefully in better shape than they were in when we found them. Next. This is accomplished by solving many small problems. So you say, well, you got a big problem in that cave. No, we don't. No, we got a whole bunch of little problems that we have to solve. And we do that with basically two groups, people and stuff. The people are you guys, agencies, and the stuff is our ropes and litters and carabiners and phones and all the things that we bring with us and we need to execute this and solve these little problems. Next. So this is the people. And this is the stuff. You can see there we have litters and ropes and webbing and all that. So, and the event. Cave rescue is an event of some type. It's a social event and a technical event. And it's social in the fact that you have to work together as teams or interact with each other to accomplish this objective, because you have to go in and do things as a team. And it's technical in the fact that you need some training and ability to use this stuff properly. So you can use it wrong and actually create more of a problem than we had to begin with. But that's the technical part of it. Next. Your people resource. And we want to get into this to some degree. We can divide the people basically into two groups, cavers and agency. There's been, when we first started the NCRC, there was really a big split in between these two groups. And we've worked very hard to try to get them working together. And we have done that to some degree. But when we look at the nature of possible emergencies that we have to deal with, and we look at the degree of training and comfort in working in the cave environment, we have to have a long way to go. We bring agencies in and we train them. But one of the sad parts about this is about the longest mock rescue we have with them can run about 10 to 12 hours. And in a real rescue, 10 to 12 hours mean that we may not be scratching the surface. And so sometimes I think we're sending people away with a false sense of security because they've never really had to go in a cave and work for 24 hours straight and living in that environment. And it can be very wearing and quite taxing on people, especially that have not had that kind of caving experience. There is a small faction of this that will contain individuals that are both agency people and cavers. Anmar is one of these guys because he is a professional EMT, and he's also a pretty darn good caver. But that actually people that fit that category are probably less than 5% of the total manpower available. Almost all agencies are going to work under this thing called the incident command system. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because agency people use it so much, it's like part of their DNA. And I think, and I've seen this happen, if all of a sudden they've got to come and react in an emergency situation and we're not using incident command, they're lost completely. So, and the second part of it is we have these people that we refer to as incident command gurus, who basically say if you're not using the incident command system, you're doing it completely wrong, and has really good fights in the administrative part of the rescue, because you got an incident command guru up there trying to make everybody work within the system, realizing that the incident command system is a good system and it has a good deal of flexibility to fit the situation. But these guru types, they try to make the rescue fit the incident command system instead of the other way around. And that can create some problems and really slow the whole operation down. Next. Okay, the familiarization we're going to get into is people need to be organized into effective teams and with clear lines of communication. And this is where the incident command system shines, is it does give you the lines of communication and the way the various functions interact with each other. And you can find a lot of information online under the FEMA website. And in fact, there's a course, several courses you can take. They're free. You take a test, and you can actually become a card-carrying ICS guy. So it's there. And we used to require some of our students to take this, and I don't think we do that anymore. But it's still, once again, you cannot learn too much about underground rescue. And the more you know, the more you know. And I would recommend, if you're really into this, go take those courses. They don't take very long, and they're kind of fun. Next. Okay, this is the essence of ICS. I got this bar along the bottom. Is that movable?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
And I can't move the slide up. Okay, there's 5 functions of incident commands, or incident command, which is command, operations, logistics, planning, and finance. You don't see finance there. These are the functions in the emergency that are there. Whether you're looking at a cave rescue, a fire, a tornado, a car wreck, anything. These are the functions that have to be dealt with. So next, we'll look at this and see how it's organized. Okay, this is the way it is. The IC is the guy in charge. Somebody's just got to be able to be the central part of this. And then operations, planning, logistics, and finance all report to the incident command system. Now, the functions exist. They're there, they need to be dealt with, but they do not mean you have to have a person in each system, in each function. I've got an example. I'm not going to do it tonight, but I've got an example of in a rescue where all the functions were handled by. So it's there. It's functionally based, but you don't have to have a person in each function. Next. They also have some auxiliaries. The command staff is attached to the IC, and these are also functions that need to be dealt with. A public information officer, especially if it's a big operation, because you're going to have the press. Safety and liaison, because they have to work with other groups. Okay, the whole system builds modularly. So as a need arises, some function will go in there to handle it, and then when that need is no longer there, that function magically disappears, or that part of the function disappears. It's still there, but you're not dealing with it because there's nothing that needs to be done at that particular time. Next. Okay, here's the thing that makes cave rescue unique. And what you'll find, you'll have discussions if you get into this a lot of times with these ICS hardcores about how great ICS is. And it's a good system, but it makes one assumption that doesn't really fill the bill and fit our situation, and that is good ICS assumes that you have extremely good and effective and instantaneous, ready to go communications. The problem is these radios that the fire guys use and the police use and everybody uses don't work underground. And so we have a situation here as a one where you have the whole command staff up there at the top right of ICS, and then you have the below ground function. And between the outside staff and what's going on in the cave is 12 hours of travel time one way. So think about this. You get a call on a Sunday night about 6 o'clock because somebody's overdue, and you send them in the cave, and by the time you get there and get ready to go in a whole bit, and you send them in, and they finally get into the entrance at 10 o'clock Sunday night. When are you going to know something about what's going on in the cave? Anybody? 10 o'clock Monday night. So this is one of the things that we have to deal with in cave rescue, is the fact that you have horrible communications because there's no other way to do this at this point in time in the operation. Go ahead, next. Your underground management. What we've found is this. You have what's going on underground, and you have what's going on the surface. And if you're going to have an effective method for solving these little problems, you really have to have a good idea of what the situation is and what the problems are. And so you're outside the cave making assumptions on what's going on in the cave, and people are in the cave making assumptions about what's going on the surface. And do you really think the two are aligned? No. And so you need a way of aligning it. The person who is best fitted or fits best on making decisions on what needs to happen underground is what is at the immediate scene. We have many discussions over the years about whether or not somebody needs to be in charge underground, called the underground coordinator. This is where it gets a lot of fun, because especially when you get the ICS gurus up there, because there is nothing in the incident command system about an underground coordinator. So since there's no underground coordinator, it does not exist. You can't use it. And we say you need somebody in charge at that point, and you need somebody to coordinate all the stuff going on underground, because you got a long distance of travel and you got really crappy communications. So we in the central region, we belong to the underground coordinator denomination. The fact that we've effectively used underground coordinator for years and years and years and years, and find that it works best and is most efficient. And so underground management would be that box up to the left there, the underground coordinator, who would report to operations. So you'll have an operations surface and operations underground, and they will be the ones that is making decisions underground. And at that point in time, where you normally have top-down management in most disasters, you got the fire chief and you got the lieutenants and you got all this stuff for fire, for tornado recovery, disaster recovery, whatever you got, it's top-down. In a cave rescue, when you've got all the work being done underground and making decisions, that top section now really reverts to a support function. And the underground coordinator will say, this is what I need, and the people on top will be getting it to them and let them make the decisions to use it. So that works best for us. Next. Remember this, though, and don't think that I'm sitting here bad-mouthing agencies or bad-mouthing the incident command system. It's very effective, and especially if it's used in the way that we use it. But the thing we need to remember is that agencies are the legal authority for the rescue. They must be notified whether they assist or not. You want to explain that a little bit, Anmar?
Yeah, so we kind of talked about this during the rescue we had a couple weeks ago. Um, there is a fine line we were treading in that particular situation. One of the problems we had there is we did not initially let we call them AHJs, the authority having jurisdiction. We did not let the AHJ know that a rescue was going on. The justification for this was, hey, it's no different than you're out in the woods with a buddy. They twist a leg and you're helping them get out of the woods. You don't have to call 911 for that because they're alert and oriented and they're capable of making rational decisions. They can refuse a rescue if they want. So from that standpoint, that was the justification we were using for that. Had that not been the case, had that person not been capable of making decisions for themselves, then the legal authority has to be in charge of that rescue. To not call for a rescue in that situation actually opens you up to just a huge, not only amount of liability, but it also potentially opens you up for criminal charges. And so that, again, that's one of those decisions that, me as somebody who lives in both worlds, I walked that fine line with that decision and I could clearly articulate why we made the decisions we made there. But I teach my students, if you're going to be doing those kind of decisions, you need to be able to clearly articulate why you're making those decisions. But again, any competent adult can refuse a rescue. You do not have to go by an ambulance to a hospital if you don't want to. And so those were the justifications that we were using, because in this case, Paul was capable of making his own rational decisions. But had that not been the case, the AHJ would have had to have been called.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
All right. I myself am about to get my EMT done. I'll be certified. Whose scope of practice do we operate under when we go out to these locations?
So that is actually a very good question.
Good question.
Yeah. That is a very situationally dependent answer. So if you are on duty for your provider, you are operating under the scope of practice of your medical director. Okay. If you are not on duty, you are operating under the scope of practice under the state that you are operating in. If you are like me, I'm an Indiana certified EMT and National Registry, I would be operating under that scope of practice. So those can change though. So like within Indiana, there are certain interventions that I could do that I could not do as National Registry.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We make pretty much every effort to let our people know. One of the things we rely on the fact though is the fact that over the years we have developed relationships with our legal authorities by actually training them, bringing them to our training, and working with them in actual rescues.
Don, let me qualify that.
Yeah.
We're actually talking about Indiana with this. In Indiana, the Indiana Department of Natural Resources are the AHJ, and we have an excellent working relationship with that. We don't have that in Kentucky. We don't have that in other states. So when we're talking about that good working relationship, we're talking about Indiana specifically.
Yeah, in fact, historically, back early on, it was the county sheriff, and then it went to volunteer fire departments, and for several years it was the Indiana State Police, and worked both rescues and body recoveries with Indiana State Police, and then DNR got more into all kinds of rescue stuff, and we've been working with them for about the last 10, 15 years maybe.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is that having seen this evolution, I say, well, I don't know where we're going to be 5 years from now, but it's probably subject to change. And so there's something that we have to stay on top of all the time. And this is especially true because of the fact that you get geared up for rescue and you get all trained up for rescue, and then all of a sudden you go about 4 years without a rescue. And when you finally get one and you start making phone calls, all the numbers have changed and all the people have changed because it's a dynamic life that we're living in with this stuff. So something you got to realize is that we continuously need to grease the skids between the people in charge and the caving community. Okay, where are we at next?
So
Okay,
what is
what-
the AHJ?
Say that again.
What is the AHJ authority you were talking about?
So that is totally dependent on where you are. So, and again, in Indiana, the authority having jurisdiction for rescue across the state would be the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. In Kentucky, it can vary. It could be the local fire chief. It could be the Kentucky Emergency Management, which has state level, regional level, and county level. Stephen Bishop, who's on this call, works with the state level emergency management. It could be the sheriff. It could be Kentucky State Police. So it can vary, and it really depends on where you are.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest arguments we've ever seen at rescues are people who are in these various places arguing who actually has authority. And on the same rescue, we've had people arguing, pointing at each other, going, "No, you are the AHJ." And then 2 hours later, they're arguing, "No, I'm the AHJ."
Yeah. Okay, so you get a call, and you are told, you're requested, please respond. So you get your instructions on where to go and get there and get your vehicle parked. And what do? So first thing you got to do is check in and let somebody know you're there. And if it's a large operation, somebody will be in personnel and they'll have a clipboard with some names, and they'll get your name and what kind of gear you have, what kind of skills you have. I remember one rescue we had in King Blair, had 128 people on scene. I think 62 people had wetsuits. And it was a rescue that required a wetsuit. It was a cold, wet cave. And so, when you come in, if you got a wetsuit, tell somebody, I'm wetsuit or I don't have wetsuit. So, and then get your assignment if you're needed right away. And if you are, you'll receive a briefing. You will do your assigned task, depending on what it is, and there's a multitude. And then you will contribute to a debriefing, and then go to rehab, get yourself rehabilitated, get warmed up, get some good food, get some water, drink, some liquid, and grab some rest, because you may need to go back in depending once again on the level of complexity of the operation. Next. You'll report to entrance control prior to entering or leaving the cave. You'll use common terminology. And this is one of the reasons why I hammered the incident command system a little bit back there, because those guys, if they're there, that's what they're going to be using. It's in their DNA now. And so you need to have, an idea of what's logistics and what's operations, that type of thing. We don't worry a whole lot about finance because we never get paid. But agency people do get paid, and fire chiefs sometimes get very, very concerned about overtime, which is really kind of comical when you've got half your fire department, probably 6 or 7 hours from the entrance, and they say, okay, I got to have everybody out right now because we're going to go on overtime. So something to keep in mind. During the task, you want to keep the noise to a minimum. And then if you're going to need to leave the scene for any reason at all, you need to check out So they know and whoever's in charge knows you're not there anymore. And maybe find out if you're going to come back, when you're going to come back. Next. As a task force member, this means you're a team, part of a team. You'll take your instruction from the task force leader. You'll do the assigned task. You'll notify the task force leader of safety and medical issues. You need to maintain that positive sense of urgency. Need to debrief with the task force leader, rehab, and return to active status as soon as possible. This sense of positive urgency. This is a very, very important aspect of this. One negative comment can spread like wildfire. And the one thing you do not want to have happen is have your rescuers all of a sudden wind up with an attitude of gloom and doom. Even if you're in a situation of 100% gloom and doom, you got to keep an upbeat attitude, and we're going to get it done attitude, and stay away from this negative thinking. And we've actually had to fight that in the opposite direction. We got called over from Illinois one time, and when we got there, it was basically doom and gloom everywhere. And we got him out, but it was a little bit more of a battle because of that. People said, how do you do a cave rescue? And I say, I can't tell you how to do a cave rescue, because all of the variables and combinations of variables that you're going to run into during a rescue vary so much. I'd say the possibilities and combinations of those comes up infinite. So to say, this is what you do a cave rescue, you can't do that. But I've also watched or been involved in enough real cave rescues and watching mock rescues. And in a given year, with a week-long seminar and several orientations and doing mock rescues and watching people learn how to do cave rescues and see how they work. And we'll have possibly maybe half a dozen to a dozen mock rescues every year. And after doing this for several years, I've kind of saw a pattern and giving it a lot of thought. And just about every rescue that I've seen or been involved in, we can break it down into 4 phases of what needs to be done. I can't tell you how to do it, but I can tell you what you need to be thinking about and the approach that you should take. And this is the approach we'll take because it's a natural approach. And the very first thing is what we call the information vacuum. The information vacuum, for some reason, when you get initial reports, is wrong. And you need to find out what's really happening, because you got people and you got stuff and you're going to make decisions and you're going to start applying these resources. You want to be applying them to the real case. You want to be applying them to a situation where they're going to do some good, solve those little problems. And that information vacuum is there, so we got to reduce that. And then we also have a thing called information decay, in that we get information, we set up a countermeasure for that information, and by the time we get in and set that countermeasure, time has passed and that initial situation is now gone, been replaced by another situation. So that's something that has to be dealt with. So the whole time from the start to the finish, you will be fighting this information vacuum in one form or another. The other 3 are pretty standard in that they're not there every time, but they may all 3 be there, or maybe just one of them. But these are the things that are going to come up and you got to start looking at. And the first one is you need to locate and prepare the patient for evacuation. Now, maybe they don't need evacuation, but assume they do. And so you start doing that. You need to prepare the cave for evacuation. Getting through a cave is one thing. Getting through a cave with a 200-pound, 6.5-foot long, 3.5-foot wide, 14 inches thick package that needs to be handled delicately is a lot different than just crawling through a cave. And so you may have to do some passage modification. You may have to move some rocks, but you need to prepare that cave so you can do that. Then you need to evacuate the patient. And that's basically overcoming obstacles and using people. Next. So these are a few of the things that you can use on an information vacuum. And I'm not going to go into these in great detail or anything else. But reporting party interviews, one of our axioms is get good, strong cavers underground fast, because the best way to find out what's really happening is getting somebody in there to look and see what's happening and then come back out and let you know. A good search team may be needed. Initial response team, need to get communications established and then contain the situation. In other words, you may have multiple entrances, so you got to get all those entrances under control. Next. Locate and prepare the patient. Okay, you may know where the patient is, you may not know where the patient is. But you need to apply first aid, do medical evaluations, hypothermia intervention, because you're going to have hypothermia no matter what the case. Get transport litters packaging together when you know what's going on with the patient. Next. Preparing the cave. You got to identify those obstacles, and they may not be obvious. You may need to know some route finding, and maybe in a multi-route cave, figure out which one's going to be the best for the situation. You may have to do rigging. You may have a haul. You may have a lower. You may have a vertical. I call it a horizontal haul, where you have to get a rope on there and drag them through a crawlway. You may have to do some passage modification. One thing we say is whatever modifications you have to do, minimize it. We do not want to damage the cave. And look at what requirements you have for difficult passages. Next. Evacuation. It is basically overcoming obstacles. You need to figure out what your personnel requirements are going to be. Handling a litter in a cave is damn hard work. No other way to say it. No way to sugarcoat it. It's hard work, and you're going to burn people out. One of the things we've been doing for the last 10 years or so is experimenting with leapfrogging teams. Anmar's going to talk a little bit about that from the last rescue. He's really gung-ho on this now. You need to watch the condition of your rescues, and you need to clean up. Next. Okay. You want to talk about leapfrogging now, Anmar?
Yeah. So one of the things that we started learning a while back was that a typical litter team, a litter handling team, and it really size dependent on the patient. If you're really lucky, you've got a patient who, weighs soaking wet 80 pounds, and two people can pick them up and carry them out of the cave. I actually took that patient out of the cave. And while I was waiting for the litter team to get there, I carried her probably about 200 or 300 feet down the passage myself. But that's an edge case. Worst case scenario, you're carrying my butt out here, and I weigh about 220 pounds. And that's going to take 10 or 12 people to effectively haul that litter through the cave. And you're going to burn out that team in about an hour to 2 hours. That team's going to need some rest. And if you can instead of making that team work for an hour to 2 hours, and then they need rest and rehabilitation, if you can work them for 10 or 15 minutes and then let them rest for 5 or 10 minutes, you can work them a lot longer. You can get 2 or 3 times the amount of actual time out of them. When you add those 10 or 15-minute intervals that they're actually working, you can get a lot more time out of those. We've actually figured we can extend that to 4 or 5 times the effective time. So what we started experimenting around with, this actually came about in 2 mock rescues back to back in the same passage in Mammoth Cave about 15 years ago, where we one mock rescue we leapfrogged and one we didn't. And the one we didn't leapfrog, we actually had to call the rescue about halfway to the entrance because the litter team, with the same number of people, the litter team was exhausted. And the second operation, we were successful and the litter team was still going strong afterwards. But what we did was we took the team, ran them for about 10 or 15 minutes. They handed off at some natural handoff point. Usually it's some kind of obstacle. And they then went ahead, boogied ahead to the next natural obstacle. Again, it's about 10 or 15 minutes worth of litter handling time. And then they sat down, they got some food, got some water, a little bit of snack, and they spent a little bit of time planning how they were going to maneuver around that next obstacle. So by the time the litter got to them, they were rested, they had a little bit of food and water, and they already had a plan of how to move that obstacle. And so we have been fine-tuning this because we don't want to let people rest too long because they've been working up a sweat, they start getting cold, they get stiff, and that's counterproductive. But by doing that, we can take that same 15, 20, 25 people and get 4, 5, 6 hours worth of time out of them, whereas previously we might have only gotten 1 to 2 hours out of them. So it really actually proved itself very, very well on Paul's evacuation on the last day on the Fisher Ridge Rescue a couple weeks ago.
Okay, responding. One of the things I learned early on was have a pack ready. I'm not going to go caving with it. It's going to be there. It's going to have the stuff I want in it, a need for a rescue, so that I don't have to worry about muddy boots or do I have enough carbide for my light? This back in those days. So I was one of the good, strong cavers underground fast. So I needed to be ready to go as soon as I got the call and just go. And then as I got older, my speed slowed down and my speed got to about 50%. So I went from a full caver to a half-assed caver. And so I don't worry too much about this anymore. I just make sure I got a comfortable chair. But have your caving gear properly deconned, a wetsuit if you're going to have a lot of wet type cavings, food and water for at least 24 hours. You're probably not going to get any kind of support prior to that. And let me tell you, until you've had to live on Red Cross frozen cheeseburgers or almost cooked Kentucky Fried Chicken dinners, you'll be glad you have your own MREs. A sleeping bag and a mat and a comfortable chair, because you may be spending a lot of time just sitting around waiting, because cave rescue is basically 99% boredom, 1% panic. Next.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah. Your pack, as light as possible, because you may need to move quickly or you may need to be carrying heavy loads. Do not bring your survey gear, your photo gear, or your cell phone. A word about cell phones and pictures. I'm sure you all heard about Kobe Bryant, the basketball player from Los Angeles that was killed in a helicopter crash a few years ago. And I don't know if you heard about the fact that one of the responding deputies took a cell phone and I guess, some pretty grim pictures of the scene at that time. And I don't know how it happened, if it was on purpose or by accident or what, but somehow those photographs got into the public domain somehow. The resultant lawsuit was in the millions of dollars. I don't know too many cavers that could handle that. So don't even tempt yourself with taking pictures of what's going on in a rescue, because you're setting yourself up for some pretty heavy duty liability if those pictures would get out. If you're taking pictures for the state, that's another thing. You turn them over to them and you don't know anything about them. Or let the state come in and take whatever pictures they want to take. But I would recommend, for your own good, just leave the cell phone at home. Be sustainable for 24 hours. A good thing to have is a Palmer furnace. A lot of times now you got to have personal waste removal. You want to have a pee bottle and a shit kit so you can get the stuff out of there. Remember, that pack may need to be carried by somebody else. And some people have learned this by the hard way. Do not leave your pack unless it is absolutely necessary. Jess Deli left her pack to go do one simple task. That simple task evolved to another simple task, to evolve to another simple task. Right before she left her pack, she was getting ready to eat lunch. She didn't have lunch. She didn't have dinner. She didn't even get anywhere out of the cave near food till about midnight that night. So if she'd had her pack, she'd probably been a much happier camper when she came out. So it's something to be aware of. Next. Possible tasks that you may get assigned: entrance control, litter team, communications, equipment transport, passage modification, rigging, personnel support, and rehab. Now, you may get assigned to a transport team to transport some stuff into the cave. And it's a 3 or 4 hour trip, and you take it in there, and do you turn around and come back out? The underground coordinator comes up and says, I need you on a litter team right here. And so that doesn't mean that when you go in as part of Team A, that you're not going to wind up on Team B and Team C before you come out, because it's going to change that frequently. And then you find out you're sitting on your butt on a phone for about 2 hours after that. So it can change.
Okay,
Next.
before we go on to that one, I want to address that as well. So during this last rescue, one of the instructions that we were giving teams in there was, you're going in as whatever team you're going in. Once you have a turnaround time, you have a report back out time. So report back out at that time unless you are reassigned by underground command. Okay, one of the big problems we have during rescue is there are people who go cowboy. And so, there are people who are not part of the command structure, but they start reassigning people doing other things because they think they know better. That actually works against the rescue operation. And it's a big problem. And I don't, if you're in surface command, you don't want to restrict the underground command from being able to reassign resources as they need, but you also don't want people just kind of randomly going off and doing random things, because now you've introduced that element into the cave and you have resources that you can't keep track of. And so those were the specific instructions that were given to teams going in, was report back out unless you are reassigned specifically by the underground coordinator and they were told who that person was. So you may be reassigned, but make sure that you are following that command structure, so you don't end up creating those random elements that's just going to make the whole situation even worse.
Oh, I'm going to die here.
Still there, Don? Did you die?
Hang on there. I'm there. I hope what's ever stuck in my throat goes away. Okay, a word about social media. My opinion right now is no. And I was never involved with heavy duty social media in a rescue until we had an incident. It wasn't a rescue. I want to emphasize that. Basically, because if we hadn't showed up, they'd have got out alive anyway. Might have taken a little bit longer, and it might have been colder and hungrier, but there was no real danger involved. And that was in Binkley's on a very, very extremely cold weekend. But it bothered me tremendously when we're in the process of trying to get these people out of the cave and make sure that they were fed and that they were not super hypothermic, and we could get them by the fire and we could give them some more food and we could warm them up. When our regional coordinator was being hounded by Good Morning America for an interview in the middle of the rescue. The reason why is because they monitor social media. And while this was going on, what was happening with all the members of some grottos around there? They got on the phone and they start yakking about what's going on because they don't know what's going on. At this point in time, it's people in a cave, the water's up, we're waiting for it to go down. We don't know what's going on. And then we got Good Morning America wanting us to tell them what's going on. And they monitor that stuff. And so at that point, I'm saying, no, we need to go back to our radios that we used to use and set up an ombudsman or somebody just to handle the social media. And please tell people just don't talk about it until we're done. So that was my take on it. And this is still my take until you get to the rescue scene and somebody in management reassigns you to some type of social media activity. Next slide. Okay, it can be a very effective communication tool when it's used properly, but it can also create a disaster with news media and rescue management. It's best to just stay off of it and ask your people at home to stay off of it until you arrive on scene. Now, I think Anmar said that they've developed and they've learned a little bit about it with this last operation. I'm kind of anxious to read the report and see what he says.
Yeah, so we actually use social media messaging tools pretty darn effectively during this last rescue operation. We were able to split people into groups, manage the information that we were giving to people. We would have this group as, I now needed some comm folks. I would send that out to a group of people who are on my first ring of standby, and I'd get 3 or 4 volunteers. I would then split them out into their own group, and more people can be contacted quickly via the social media messaging applications than if I had to just call or text, setting up text groups and things like that. So also, it's a lot easier for social media messaging apps to get through when there's minimal network connectivity, where you can't get phone or even text messaging oftentimes can't get through. So we used it to a very high effect. But what we also were emphasizing to people was to please keep this very, very tight, keep it discreet, keep it out of the broader social media, from the standpoint of please don't post this on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or anything like that, because doing that starts becoming it goes viral basically, because everybody wants to know what's going on, and you post hey, there heading to a rescue, and you're vague booking it, and now suddenly 20 people want to know what's going on, and then their friends want to know what's going on. Then you get the thoughts and prayers, and now thousands of people know, and that starts hitting the regular media. And now all of a sudden, we who are trying to deal with the rescue, we're getting our communications capability are being clogged up by people who are trying to get information from us when they don't have any need to know right at that moment. So we have that problem. Then we have the media, who is they're trying to contact us. They're trying to contact the local responding agencies. Those responding agencies, who may not have been aware that a situation was going on at that point, now are suddenly going, "Hey, what's going on?" And when they're getting pressure for information, suddenly they look bad. And when they look bad, they look very unfavorably upon us. And so it basically, it just complicates the entire operation, not adding 10 or 20% more difficulty, but making it 10 or 20 times more difficult. And so from that standpoint, social media is good from the standpoint of we can get information out very, very quickly. During other rescues we've had, I've made public announcements of, okay, you've heard about this rescue going on. If you're a caver within a 2-hour radius of this area and you have a wetsuit, please, here's a messaging group that I've set up. Please go into that group, and that way, and wait for information. That way I can have that pool of people ready to go. In this case, in this last one, we asked people to keep it very quiet, and I'm quite frankly very, very grateful and pleased that for the most part it was kept very, very quiet. It did start to kind of leak out a little bit by the second day, but even then it did not go viral, and it never hit the media at all, which is, for a 3.5-day rescue, quite frankly, is unheard of. So that's a miracle. So I'm quite frankly, I'm just shocked. I've never had that. I've been involved in rescue pretty much all of my life. So anyway, that's our word on social media with that. It's a good and bad thing. I think people are becoming a little more sophisticated with this, but that's kind of our expectations when we're calling you for rescue. Back to you, Don.
Next slide. Training. We got all kinds of training, and it's fun. Questions?
So we're going to entertain a few questions about any of the stuff Don just presented, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we actually activate a rescue in this area, like kind of what our protocols are. You stunned them all into silence, Don. I got somebody raising their hand. I can't see who it is. Andrew?
Yeah, Andrew Lusky. Yeah.
If you're talking, you're still muted.
Yeah.
We're not hearing anything. All right. Well, if there are no questions there, what I would like to do is just give you a little bit of an idea of what we do in the Indiana, Kentucky area. First, I want us to just let you know, we toss NCRC around a lot. Don and I and a lot of the people that you deal with here, we are NCRC instructors. Jess is the regional coordinator. We, as NCRC does not respond to cave rescues. NCRC is a training and resource coordination body. It is not a rescue response body. We do maintain caches of equipment, specialized equipment, such as during this last rescue, we had the litters that were used. We had one of the drills that was used to modify the cave. We had the communications equipment and the communications lines, but NCRC itself did not respond to the rescue. You may call people who are involved in NCRC to help coordinate resources, but you don't call NCRC to do the rescue. one of the things that we typically get, there's about 5 or 6 of us who have been doing rescue in this area for years and years and years. And what I want to emphasize here is, when it comes to rescue, I'm a civilian. In the state of Indiana, there was a time period that my home county, Lawrence County, Indiana, had a county cave rescue team, and I was a member of the county cave rescue team that was part of the AHJ in the county. So in Lawrence County, I had the legal authority to perform a rescue. I was the AHJ. The county cave rescue team no longer exists. When I do a cave rescue in Indiana, I do it as a volunteer with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. They are the AHJ. I am volunteering with them. But when I go to a rescue, when you call me and say, "Hey, we have a person injured in a cave, we need some assistance," I show up as Anmar Mirza, volunteer cave rescue guy. If there's an AHJ there, I'm operating under their authority. If there's no AHJ there, I'm operating just as a friend of the caver. So I want to make that clear. And that's pretty much the case of all of us who show up at a rescue. There may be some special circumstances. There may be somebody in a particular county who's showing up as a representative of the AHJ, but this is just kind of the general way it works. From that standpoint, one of the reasons that Don or I or Jess or Leanne or Stephen get called is because the caving community knows us. We're family. I mean, caving is a big family. Many of you have taken cave rescue training from us. Many of you have been on cave rescues with us. You're used to working with us in that capacity. And so it's just natural that something happens, you're going to call the people that you know and trust. And so from that standpoint, that to me, that is just the natural way it would be. In the caving community, I have no authority to do a rescue. And quite frankly, if the NSS suddenly said that they wanted to build the cave rescue team, I wouldn't volunteer to be in charge of it. I don't think it would be a good idea to begin with. But it's the way these things work. So I will say, though, when I get called for a cave rescue, and I tell everybody in Indiana, and I recommend this pretty much anywhere, but I tell specifically folks in Indiana, if you need rescue from a cave and you dial 911 first, you deserve whatever you get. Because and I mean, yes, I mean, I see Chris and Caitlin there. You're kind of laughing because you got your screen on there, but I'm kind of being funny about that, but I'm also very serious. And the reason I'm being serious about that is because when you dial 911, the 911 dispatcher has never heard the word cave rescue before. And I mean, maybe here in Bloomington, maybe there was a time period 20 years ago when we were having a cave rescue month and they actually kind of had a routine down, but that's past. And so they're going to sit there and they're going to look through all their protocol books and they're going to go, what the heck do we do? And so they're going to start calling around to all the various agencies. They're going to call the sheriff, and the sheriff's going to go, I don't know what to do. The sheriff's going to call the fire chiefs in the area, and the fire chief's going to, well, we don't know how to do. And well, I know this guy who goes caving there. Well, and it's like, there's a good chance that maybe the word will get to me or Don or Jess or somebody like that. But there's also an equally good chance that it'll be Bubba who has a cave in his backyard and is on the local fire department, and they will respond. And then they will attempt to try to do the rescue. And if it's, somebody just trapped in the, 200 feet into the local Boy Scout cave, they'll probably be able to do that rescue just fine. But if it's one of us, we're not going to be trapped 200 feet into the entrance of the local Boy Scout cave. We're going to be somewhere in there that would probably kill Bubba from the local fire department. Okay. And I'm not knocking Bubba on the local fire department. They are good at getting people out of burning buildings. Sane people run out of burning buildings. Firefighters run into them. Okay. They are good at stabilizing a vehicle that's been crushed or whatever. They don't have the training budget, time, or effort to train for a cave rescue event that may only happen once in a lifetime in their county. Okay, so it is not a knock against them. That's just a simple fact that it's an unusual situation. So when you dial 911, you get that random element. Maybe you get one of us who get called early, or maybe you get the local bubbas trying to respond to the rescue, because bless their hearts, as they say in the South, they will try to respond. And there's an equally good chance that they may hurt themselves trying to respond. And there's also a really good chance that they will then keep us away from the scene, even if we get called to the scene, because to them, we're civilians. Okay. And they are used to keeping civilians away from what they think is, and I'm doing air quotes here, a dangerous scene. And so to them, they're not going to let us into that scene when we need to be in there early. We need to be in there first. Okay, so one of the considerations on the last rescue we did was we wanted the rescue well established. We wanted our resources well committed before we let the AHJs know. That way, in the off chance they decided that they had a brain aneurysm and they wanted to try to take it all over, it was already happening. And that they could not basically derail what I call, when the rescue reaches a stage, what I call it's running on rails, and they would have a hard time derailing it. So if you call one of us first, we will notify the AHJ as appropriate. Okay, we will make those decisions. And if it's somebody who is they're unconscious, they're not capable of making decisions for themselves, we'll let the AHJs know as early as possible. But we will already be started there. So the way I run it in Indiana, of course, is as soon as we start to roll, I call the DNR and let my contacts within the DNR know that we have a rescue running. And they basically say to me, do you need anything from us? And if I do, I'll let them know. And if I don't, I said, I'll keep you informed. And they say, great. It works really smooth. It has worked like that for about the last 10 years. And wow, that's awesome. Ideally, before that, what we would do is we would dial 911 in the area that it was at. And I would say, hey, this is Anmar with the cave rescue team. We've had a report of somebody who is injured in such and such cave. We're responding. Do you wish us to continue? Okay. Now notice, I was being a little tricky here. Cave rescue team. What cave rescue team? I didn't identify a specific cave rescue team. I just said cave rescue team. The question that I asked was, we are responding, do you wish us to continue? And when that dispatcher says yes, that's on tape. Okay. An agency having jurisdiction said yes, continue. We're covered at least for the short term. Okay. It's still kind of a legal fine line there, but at least for the short term, we've got some protection in there. And that dispatcher is now going to then call whoever they're going to call next and say, hey, the cave rescue team is responding. So when Bubba shows up or the sheriff shows up or whatever, they're already primed that a cave rescue team is there. So they're primed to think of us not as civilians, but as a cave rescue team. And so again, I know how these people think. I live in that world as well. I know how to get in their heads and manipulate them to make them do what I want them to do. So that's why you call us first. Let us handle interfacing with the agencies, because we will do it, but we will do it in a fashion that will get the cavers the help they need in the fashion that they need. All right. So again, that was my preface. Any questions on that before I move on to the next thing? All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is when we do get a rescue, how do we decide how to call? Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters. Okay, cave busters. It really depends on the type of rescue, where it is, and what we need. In ye olden days, okay, rescues were big, and I mean they were big. My first few rescues, there would easily be 80 to 150 people on a rescue. And then as we started getting more people trained, as we started developing better and better techniques, the rescues started getting smaller. Even for the same type of rescue, we started needing fewer and fewer people. We're getting more efficient at doing them. And so now we've had examples of almost identical rescues, similar patients, similar injuries in the exact same locations in caves. One rescue might take 40 or 50 people, 12 hours. The exact same type of rescue 5 or 6 years later took 25 people, 3 or 4 hours. And so we've gotten a lot more efficient. And like the rescue that happened a couple of weeks ago, had that happened 30 years ago, that would have been probably a couple of weeks of rescue, just because the techniques and the equipment that we use just weren't there. Conversely, though, one of the things that probably would not have been happening too is people weren't pushing as far into the caves, because we also have better equipment that's allowing us to get further and further into these caves. So it's sort of a balancing act there. But I'm going to call as few people as possible. Okay, I'm going to initially, I'm going to call the highest trained people that I've got who are closest. So the more training somebody has, and the more I've worked with them and I know their capabilities, the more likely they're going to get called. And one of the things that I look for, not only the training, but I'm also looking for people who will do what the hell I ask them to do. Because there are a lot of people out there who they take more work to manage than they're worth. They may be really good riggers, they may be really strong cavers, but they're going to cause me more management headaches than they're worth. And I mean, honestly, just when I first became involved in cave rescue, Don, what was that term you used for me when I first became involved with cave rescue?
Oh, obnoxious little twerp.
Yeah. You know,
OLT.
OLT, obnoxious little twerp. You know, and so my very first week-long cave rescue training, I think Don repeated to me for the entire week, the best thing that I should do is to sit down and shut up. Because when I went through level 1, I'd had more cave rescue experience than most of the instructors. And so it was difficult for me to look at these people and go, but what you're telling me does not jive with the experience that I've had during rescues. So somebody who will just do what I ask them to do and turn around and be, all right, I've done this task. What do you need me to do next? Go over here and wait for the next task. Okay, I'll do that. And then I'm ready to go when you ask. That's valuable. That's incredibly valuable. So that's who I'm prioritizing. I'm looking for those people. I'm also looking for the people, if I need highly specialized skills, cave modification, there's only, I mean, we're getting more people trained in this. We're getting more people who are getting skilled at this, but there's still only a small subset of cavers who are really good at this. And so if I need cave modification, you're going to be kind of high on that list. And so that's something that I'm looking for. Rigging is actually one of those things that rigging is kind of it's either or. Rigging is sort of a dime a dozen. There are a lot of people who know how to do a lot of rigging, but in the grand scheme of things, rigging is actually one of the lowest common things that we need during a cave rescue. Last couple weeks ago was kind of an exception. We needed a whole bunch of rigging during that one, and we needed a whole bunch of highly specialized rigging. But when you look at all the cave rescues that are out there, we actually only need a minimum amount of rigging. So somebody who knows how to do some basic rigging, that's a pretty easy skill, but it's a useful skill to have in the back of your head. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. Somebody who can survive in the cave, and who can follow orders, and who can think independently when necessary, but who understands how the whole operation fits together and how they may fit within it. We're going to try and get, if it's a search, I want people who know that particular cave. In the Binkley rescue, I had 3 people on the surface who knew the cave well enough to be able to search the area we thought they would be in. One of those people was a cowboy, okay, and that was a problem. And so the big problem we have in those type of situations are, I don't have enough personnel who have that knowledge of that cave. So I have to be very careful with allocating those resources. I send those people in the cave, and Now I don't have anything. So that's a valuable piece. If it's a carryout of a known patient in a known location, I may only need, if depending upon how far in the cave they are, I may only need 15, maybe 20 people. I have done so many rescues in Buckner. Okay, I quite literally have done almost 100 rescues in Buckner. Most of them been searches. We used to take bets on where we'd find people in the cave. But we've done, Don, I think we've done like probably about 15 carryouts out of Buckner, something like that.
Yeah.
And we've done a ton of mock rescues out of Buckner. So I have a really fine-tuned feel for how many people it takes to get somebody out of pretty much any location in Buckner. And we will try to get that number of people there. And so that's going to be 15 or 20 people is what I need to get somebody out of Buckner. That's pretty much what it is. And so we're going to call that number of people. All right. Now, once I have that, I may, depending upon what I feel that the overall rescue might need, I may go out. We do this in rings, okay? And we do rings by geographical location. So my initial ring is that hour or so response time. Who is within an hour of response to this area? And so those are the people I'm calling first. My next ring is that 2 to 3 hours out. And then I'm going 3 to 5 hours out. And so if this happens in Bloomington, Indiana, my 1 hour is basically the Bloomington and surrounding counties. And then my 2 hours out is I'm starting to go up towards Indianapolis down to Louisville area. And then going out further, I'm getting out to GCG, Doug. I'm getting to the up towards the northern Indiana folks and down to Evansville. Same thing with Kentucky, depending upon where it is. We've got, in this particular case, with Paul's rescue out there, we were doing the southern Indiana, the Bloomington folks were kind of that next ring out. We had the Nashville folks out there. We did actually put the Blacksburg folks on standby simply because several Blacksburg folks were part of the Fisher Ridge crew, but they also were friends of Paul's. And they were good technical riggers and strong cavers. So we had them on standby, but that's kind of how we think. And so if we put you on standby, what we're asking you to do is just have your gear ready to go and just be by the phone. Doesn't mean you can't go to work, you can't, go to bed, whatever. Matter of fact, I want you to get some rest, make sure you've had a chance to eat, whatever. But just be ready if I need you. I may not need you. I don't want you to put your life on hold. And if you can't respond, just let me know. That's fine. Everybody has a life. We do have plenty of people. If you can't respond, I can replace you. That's, there's very few people who have such unique skills that you're irreplaceable. But if you can respond, that's great. What I don't need is to be bugged every half an hour. Do you need us yet? Do you need us yet? Do you need us yet? If I put you on standby, I've got you on the list. Okay. And when you're on standby, I need you to just be ready to respond. That's all I need. I will keep you updated as I have time to update information and push that information out, but I may not have time. And so once we know whether we need you or not, we will let you know. If I tell you to stand down, maybe the operation is nearing completion, or maybe I just know that we have enough resources to accomplish what we need to do. But that's kind of just the generalized structure of how we operate with bringing in personnel. I may also ask people to be on, I don't really have a term for it, but it's kind of a conditional standby. So this is I don't need you for this or the next operational period, but if this rescue goes 2 or 3 operational periods out, I may need you tomorrow. And so that would be yeah, you're kind of on standby, but you go about your normal business and don't even expect a call from me until tomorrow. So those are kind of the things to expect. In the meantime, please don't be posting on social media, hey, what's going on? Or, yeah, on standby for a rescue. It's not going to help the situation at all. And if I've asked you to keep it tight, yes, I know we need to let our family know, our boss know, that we may be missing work or whatever, but please, please, please keep it as tight as absolutely possible. The more people that know, the more likely it is to escape out into the wild. And once it does escape out into the wild, it's gonna bog the system down. It does not help. Don, you want to add anything else into that?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I'll give you an incident we thought was pretty funny. It was in Indiana, DNR's in charge. I mean, by law. And there's a bunch of young guys that had been through some training and stuff, and they were on scene. We were getting ready to send a team in, and he came up and said, "Can I go? Can I go?" Remember that?
Yeah, during the Binkley rescue, I mean, these guys are asking us if they can go in the cave, and I'm just like, you're in charge. I mean, you are at the AHJ. I can't stop you from going into the cave. Of course, I looked at the swift water and went, but if you do step into that water, you probably get swept away and die. But yeah, it is a very delicate balancing act sometimes dealing with AHJs. In this particular rescue last couple weeks ago, I keep forgetting we had a debrief last night on this, and about a third of the people who are on this call here were at that debrief. So I feel like I'm repeating myself, but one of the very delicate situations that we were dealing with was, who do we notify as the AHJ? Okay. This was a carefully planned decision. If we had called 911, that would have just been a disaster. Okay. An absolute total disaster. So Stephen Bishop and I had lots of discussions back and forth on this, and we were talking also with the rest of the command team in there about kind of our thought processes on this. But ultimately, what we wanted to let the rescue get far enough along, and again, Paul was in his, he was effecting his own rescue with the help of friends. So there's no legal requirement at that point to turn it over to an AHJ. But again, we are walking a fine line. If something had gone wrong, the liability shoots through the roof at that point, and that's a tricky situation to be in. So we finally decided, okay, now we're getting to the point where we're going to be putting Paul into a litter, and we've got a lot more people involved. The media might start getting involved with this, and so now's the time. It's running on rails. The AHJ can't screw it up for us too badly, and so we're gonna make this call. But who do we call? And if we call the local fire department, first off, there is a nonprofit rescue team in that county that we've worked with before, but they are not an AHJ. They may have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the AHJ, but they're actually not the AHJ. Okay. And they are not equipped to handle these kinds of rescues. And they understand that. They know that. I'm not knocking them, not bashing them. So do we call the sheriff in that county? We do not have any kind of relationship with the sheriff. Do we call the fire chief of the department that has jurisdiction in that area? Do we call the EMA director for that county, emergency management agency? So Stephen and I discussed this, and Stephen he actually has a personal relationship with the interim director for the state emergency management director. And so the discussion that we had was, we were going to call him first and just let him know that we had a rescue going on and get his recommendation on how to proceed next. And we were going to explain the situation, Stephen was going to, and let him know, and then have him recommend the next course of action. So Stephen called him up, and his recommendation was he was going to let the regional EMA, emergency management director, know, and the regional director let the county director know. And it ended up that the two of them and one of the local fire chiefs came and had a meeting with us at the command post And we made sure that the people at the command post knew that we called the Admiral on deck signal there. It's like, don't be running around like idiots when we have these visiting dignitaries coming in. We made sure that they saw we had this really nice whiteboard up there with all our organizational stuff in there. We had equipment laid out on the table and all that. I mean, we looked professional. We took them past all that stuff. We took them into a private room that had all the maps of stuff going on, and we introduced ourselves. We laid it all out. We did never, at no point did we challenge their authority, because the moment you do that to any kind of bureaucrat, you've lost them. Okay. But we were working very hard to subtly dazzle them with our professionalism, and it worked. Stephen, you still on here? He may have already taken off. Anyway, it worked. And so basically by the end, an hour talking with him, and by the end of the meeting, they were asking us how can they get more training in this, and who would they call if there was a cave rescue, and all of that. So by the time they walked out, they're like, if you have any problems with the media showing up and trespassing, or anybody giving you, if you need police presence out there to help control bystanders or anything like that, you just give us a call. We will speed it through and we will support you, but we're not gonna get in your way, which was exactly what we were hoping to accomplish. So from that point on, we were basically operating with the blessing of the AHJ. But that was a very tricky operation, because had we approached them as just a bunch of cavers, it very easily would have gone the other direction. So again, those are kind of examples of why that has to be handled very carefully. So anyway, I think that's all Don and I have.
I got one more comment, Anmar.
All right, go ahead, Don.
So I was talking about the way things change over time. Back in the late 90s, we were doing a lot of OCRs, and this is as the NCRC was developing credibility. And at that point in time, it was basically late 80s, early 90s, in the state of Kentucky. And I don't remember how they were organized on the state level at the time, but before someone could participate in a cave rescue, and this is as a volunteer fireman or professional fireman or emergency management team, rescue team of any kind, they had to have a card, which we used to pass out, that they had attended an OCR. So having NCRC training in the form of an OCR was required to be able to participate in a cave rescue in the state of Kentucky.
Among the AHJs.
Huh? It wasn't
among the AHJs.
It was?
Among the AHJs.
Oh, okay. But at that time, we knew who was in charge and who to contact. And so as we get time and time and time, and basically you go a long time without a major rescue, now you don't know, who do we call? And that's because some of this hierarchy changes. And so one thing you got to be aware of the fact is that this is an ongoing process over the years. It'll change, it'll change, it'll change. So keep that in mind. Got a good relationship right now. You don't have another good rescue in about 5 years, it's going to be different. So
that's not an invitation to go out and get hurt. I'm looking at you, Chris. All right. Well, thank you for your attention. We'll be happy to. Yeah, go ahead, Sonny.
So I know we have to go through the whole level 0 up to. We need to already know how to repel and have that stuff down before we attend, correct?
So for an orientation to cave rescue.
Well, I've gone through the first one. I'm talking about the week-long one, though.
Yeah. Okay. So for week-long NCRC, it's highly recommended that you have the entrance skills in. That's being able to ascend, change over, rappel, change over, climb, and then down climb. We do offer a little clinic at the very beginning Friday night where we will teach people to do that, but it's recommended that you come in with those skills in advance. And I know Stephanie has been really good at working with people to get them up to speed before they go into week long. And there's plenty of other Grotto members there who are happy to work with folks coming in with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So like I said, we're happy, or we thank you for your attention tonight, and we're happy to stick around and answer any questions. But that's what we got.
All right, thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Anmar. If there are any questions, we'll give you guys a couple minutes to kind of think of them and ask Dawn and Anmar here. I've been told to let you guys know that Texas Cavers are saying hi. I'm sitting in a car with a few Blacksburg folks right now, so.
Hey, Blacksburg folks.
Say hi.
Hey, Blacksburg.
Anmar says hi.
Me too.
Dawn as well. But cool. If there's no other questions, a couple training opportunities that are coming up with Greater Cincinnati Grotto. We do have a wilderness first aid class that we will be hosting at the Great Saltpeter Cave Preserve at cost. And that will be July 20th and 21st. Registration's open, and hopefully it's a good opportunity for people to gain some of the medical skills needed out doing recreational activities, both caving and not caving. What is kind of unique about this particular class is we do have two cavers who are teaching it. So they do have a little bit of anecdotal stories and things like that that they can share with us for the unique environment of a cave. So look out for that one. The other big training kind of coming up in the region is there's an orientation to cave rescue that will be May 18th and 19th in Fayetteville, Indiana. The registration is not yet up for that, but save the date and keep an eye out for that registration. All right. If there's nothing else from
I have one more question.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Hey, everyone. First of all, thank you for the presentation. Very well put. Don, you mentioned that certain regions or certain maybe organizations run their incident command structure a little bit differently in regards to underground command. I'm not kind of asking you to or putting words in your mouth, but I don't know which regions kind of do that. Are there certain ones that kind of that you could name specifically? Or?
Okay. A lot of times this is event driven. So I'm going to say we're going to have an underground coordinator every time. Maybe, maybe not. And then you have areas where we don't need an underground coordinator. The thing of it is that it's going to vary from area to area and cave to cave. If you have a situation with a bunch of multi-drop pits, bang, 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 the way we tell the underground coordinator to work is to basically go to the patient, go back to the entrance, go back to the patient, go back to the entrance, and don't spend a lot of time in any one area. Just make sure all the various areas are being coordinated, operated, no problems. And don't do a lot of window shopping, as I call it, because they'll go stand in one area and watch somebody rig for 30 minutes when they need to be somewhere else, making sure that somebody else doesn't have a problem. Then you go to an area with a bunch of multi-drop pits. You really don't want somebody. I don't think people want to go where they're bouncing that to the bottom and then back out and then going back down and then coming back out. They're going to get tired. So normally on something like that, and this is a lot of it in the southeast region, they don't really use an underground coordinator. But the other thing is they normally have enough phones where they will put a phone at every drop. So the communication between those specific obstacles and the entrance and what they need and what the entrance can supply are different, because it's going to fit that cave environment. And we had a lot of arguments over the years on, I don't need an underground coordinator. Well, in that case, no, you don't. In fact, it's not productive to have one. And then other areas where they've had so many rescues in some of these deep pits that it's almost routine on how to affect the rescue. And so it's almost like a practice to where they don't really need an underground coordinator. But I'll lay you 10 to 1. Who's the guy that needed all the transfusions?
That was Dwight Kemp.
Yeah, Dwight Kemp.
And
I'll bet you, whether they say they did or not, they had to have an underground coordinator on that, maybe, because there was a lot of activity in it.
I actually was on I was actually on 2 rescues in Tag area. One was a double body recovery, but they may not have had one person acting in that role, but they actually did have people who are doing the function of it. And the problem that we have is that sometimes you get people, they're so steeped in ICS that they lose sight of the fact that the function is being fulfilled, but there's no ICS checkbox for it. And it's what Don was alluding to in the presentation was the fact that the argument hasn't been about the function itself. The argument has been about the terminology. And we just tend to find that underground coordinator is natural language. So the biggest argument with terminology is if you want to put it into ICS terms, it's an underground branch director if it's a certain size of an operation. It's an underground division chief if it's another size of an operation. And so it's really how many angels can dance on the head of a pinhead. But it's just, we use the term underground coordinator because people understand what that means.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great response. For what it's worth, last summer's Huntsville Cave Rescue Unit OCR, we did, or they taught us with underground coordinator and ICS and phones. So it's pretty multidisciplinary.
Yeah. So like in 2 weeks ago, we had people who were acting as underground coordinators, but they weren't doing the actual job that the job description would have of moving between the patient and the entrance and solving those problems. But they were doing more limited geographical areas. And that's also a subset of what we might ask the underground coordinator to do. A lot of times what ends up happening is the underground coordinator, if everything else is working really well, ends up actually being more of an evacuation coordinator. And so it's a job that is dynamic and fluid. And in the early stages of a rescue, it may be far more important than it is in the later stages of a rescue. Like the rescue that happened at convention, in the early stages of that rescue, we really needed that back and forth. And towards the later stages, it really, it was starting to run on rails. And so it was less needed.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments? All right. Well, thank you, Don, and thank you, Anmar. And on behalf of the Greater Cincinnati Grotto, we thank everybody for joining. Have a good evening.
Fun.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.